whatever happened in UP Assembly, don't you think it was a big blot on Indian democracy? Shameful of?
Yes, I think it was a disgraceful episode. But what happened outside of the assembly is, I think, probably more disgraceful than what happened inside the House on Tuesday. I mean, I think the BJP started buying up MLAs a fortnight ago. It induced defections, it engineered dissent, it timed its own measures at the government level in such a way that the BSP would be provoked into withdrawing support, and at the same time it built its own backup in the form of these dissident congressmen and dissident BSP MLAs and so on and so forth. And I think one of the most cynical things that the BJP government did, BJP-led government under Kalyan Singh did, was to start mucking around with the bureaucracy. It transferred 158 senior officers and tried to play Dalit groups within the bureaucracy off against one another. And then second, it amended the Prevention of Atrocities Against the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Act. It issued a directive, rather, that its use should be restrained, virtually stopping its use, when in fact there is a very strong case for setting up more courts and registering more complaints and cases and so on. And it's in fact wrong to presume that under Mayawati this act was grossly misused, because there were about 1,600 cases of registered under the act under her regime, compared to over 2,700 in the corresponding period 2 years ago. So it's not right to say that the act was being misused. And the third and the most, I think, horrible thing to happen was the firing on Dalits in Muzaffarnagar on October 7th, which was totally unprovoked. A Dalit woman had been raped and murdered by upper caste landlords, and there were these unarmed Dalits peacefully protesting, and the police opened fire upon them. And Kalyan Singh not only did not apologize for what happened, he actually victimized a Dalit police officer by transferring him. Now, I think that is when pressure from below began to build up on Mayawati. Mayawati has definitely contributed to some amount of Dalit self-assertion in UP, and so Dalit youth no longer take upper caste supremacy lying down. They won't bow and scrape before the upper caste people. They will not sit on the floor in government houses. They demand equal treatment. They demand schools. They demand development funds and so on and so forth. Now, the firing actually sent shock waves through UP, and I think that's when Mayawati came under pressure to withdraw support. And BJP, I think, had done this in a very calculated way and built its own alternative plan through defectors. In doing so, it not only practiced a spectacular level of opportunism and the most disgusting form of horse trading, it broke every rule in the book of democracy. It violated every single norm, and most important, it broke the solemn commitment that Mr. Bajpayee had himself given to Parliament in May last year, when he was facing a motion of no confidence, which he lost, as you know. On May 28th, he told the Lok Sabha, "I will never touch power that comes to me, to the party, to the BJP, through defections and breaking up of other parties. I won't touch such power even with a barge pole." Now, here is the same party actively inducing defections and breaking up other parties just to survive in power. Power for what? Power to promote upper caste interests? I think this is disgusting. And I think it is altogether sad that the governor did not stop some of this when he could have done so, and he ordered this vote of confidence, which went through. There are problems with that vote. Sorry.
Yeah. Also, it's unholy. Like BJP had said, "Oh, we are in agreement with BSP and we are joining hands," and now, like, it's
Yeah, I mean, BSP is a party which has never lost a single opportunity to attack, insult, and humiliate the BJP. Right? It has said this is a Manuwadi party. We hate them. We have nothing to do with them, and yet the BJP, goes and allies itself with them just in order to to grab power. And I think it's a very disgraceful thing that a party which claims to be value based, party with a different should be. I think it has demolished that claim completely after what has happened in UP. It cannot claim to be a party which has any values whatsoever except that of the pursuit, the naked, shameless pursuit of raw power. That's what the BJP has reduced itself to. Well, sorry.
But how do you see the union government's recommendation to the president as such on the
Well, I think
assembly?
I think once the vote of confidence went through on Tuesday, the Union Cabinet was wrong to recommend the imposition of President's rule and dissolution of the Assembly. There were problems with the vote. For instance, the Speaker was biased. He was probably in cahoots with the BJP the way the whole thing was handled. Several MLAs belonging to the Samajwadi Party and the BSP were thrown out physically by marshals. So it was not an unproblematic vote, but it was not so gross as to negate its entire value and lose its validity. And I think it's pretty true to say that these 222 MLAs probably do support Kalyan Singh. Now, whether they should or not is another matter. I think the 12 BSP MLAs probably should be disqualified under the Anti-Defection Act. The Speaker was probably wrong, was definitely wrong, I would say. The Speaker was definitely wrong to allow those 12 BSP MLAs to sit on the Treasury benches and vote, although he was fully aware that the 12 do not represent 1/3 of the minimum strength, which is the minimum strength under the anti-defection law in order to qualify for a split. Right? The BSP has a strength of 67, so 12 do not add up to 1/3 of that. So I think he was wrong, but the remedy to correct that wrong lies not in dissolving the Assembly, but in demanding the disqualification of these 12 MLAs under the anti-defection law and Schedule 10 of the Constitution. Now, instead of doing that, I think the UF cabinet made the mistake of accepting the governor's report, which was not a very accurate report, and recommend dissolution. But I must say, it's to their credit that they learned from that mistake and paid not only heed, but I think due regard to the president's advice, and reconsidered that decision and changed it, and then decided not to impose president's rule. And I think the president himself played an outstanding role. I think for the first time in many decades, we have a president in the elevated tradition of Dr. Radhakrishnan or Zakir Hussain, who has very high values, who's a learned man, who has a very objective view of democracy, and who has the wisdom to counsel the right kind of advice and to the cabinet. And it took him obviously some courage to say that the Union Cabinet was wrong and had not understood the full implications of the Bommai judgment and its importance to both democracy and the preservation of the principle of federalism. The centre's authority or power to dismiss state governments must be used only in the rarest of cases. And the Bommai judgment, I think, imposes several constraints upon the centre and the governor, which were definitely violated in this particular case. So I think it's a very sagacious kind of advice that Mr. Narayanan gave to the cabinet, and it's, I think, to the credit of people like Mr. Indrajit Gupta, who was himself an outstanding political leader, that he stuck to principles and demanded a reconsideration. I think a very positive role was also played by the DMK and the Telugu Desam parties. And Mr. Chandrababu Naidu again was, I think, very, very forthright in demanding that the cabinet reconsider this decision. So I think, on the whole, if you drew up a balance sheet, of course, the Congress is the biggest loser. It not only lost 60% of its MLAs, but it proved that its leadership was bankrupt and absolutely tactless. It could not anticipate and prevent such large-scale defection, although there were so many signals. For instance, Mr. Agarwal, who led the defectors group, had revolted as early as in January this year. Okay, it is known that he could quit the party anytime. Okay, there were others who had hinted that they would be very unhappy with the appointment of Mr. N.D. Tiwari as party president in UP. Yet Mr. Kesri went ahead and made that appointment. There were several rumblings in Congress ranks and among the MLAs over the past month, which everyone could hear. They were clearly audible, except for Mr. Kesri. So Mr. Kesri, I think, very, very foolishly decided to ignore all these things and was faced with these defections, which took him by surprise, whereas in fact they could have been anticipated and prevented.
Disagreement between Kesri and Jiten Prasad was also somewhere.
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt in my mind that that has played a role, because Mr. Prasad wasn't very happy at Mr. Tiwari's appointment and he refused to intercede and perhaps in fact quietly, discreetly encouraged Mr. Agarwal to go ahead and split away from the party and so on and so forth. But the message that has gone out is that the Congress is in deep trouble. It's a party without direction. The whole plan that Mr. Kesri, or the promise that he made of rejuvenating the party, now stands, I think, hopelessly betrayed. The Congress is going downhill. What has happened in UP will send out a signal to Congress dissidents in other states too. And what is remarkable is the narrowing of the distance between the Congress and the BJP. What was once a secular party has come so close to a communal party. You don't defect to a party which is at the other end of the spectrum. You defect to a party which is pretty close to you. And I think that is what has happened to the Congress in UP, which is tragic in many ways. The second biggest loser, in my view, is the BJP. The BJP may have retained power, but it's power without purpose. And at the same time, it has lost credibility. It has lost its claim to being a party based on principle and discipline completely. It is, I think, going to be hopeless. Yeah, the BJP is the second biggest loser, and I think a third loser is the BSP, the Bahujan Samaj Party, which has lost 12 of its MLAs. But I don't think that loss is as serious as the BJP's loss of credibility and so on, because at the ground level, there's definitely a consolidation of the BSP base among Dalits, who have gained from some of the measures that Mayawati took in the 6 months that she was in office. The biggest gainer in some sense is Indian democracy. And the fact that we have a very resilient system which could take these shocks, and we have some corrective even at the top through the president, through the cabinet, which is prepared to learn from its mistakes and change course just in the nick of time, which is a very, very positive indication. Another gain, I think, is in the form of what future governments are going to do when faced with problems in determining majorities in state assemblies and so on. I think all future governments will have to pay more serious attention to the Bommai judgment, and they'll have to forget pretending that the governor has some wide discretionary powers to make or break state governments, irrespective of their strength in legislatures. I think this will encourage more responsible behavior on the part of both governors and central governments in the future, which is great. And to some extent, I think a third gainer is the United Front, which has recovered some of its dignity which has consolidated its unity and which has raised its stature somewhat.
You mean to say that it's not going to have a very serious implication on the United Front government's stability as such?
No, I don't think so. I don't believe that Mr. Kesri can easily withdraw support, although he had threatened to do so on Monday and Tuesday, and more or less coerced the cabinet into demanding president's rule. I don't think that his stature in his own party is high enough now. In fact, there's tremendous dissidence and it's going to grow in the Congress, and he has demolished his own image as a veteran leader who's tactically very, very smart and who knows what's happening at the grassroots in the party, right? I think he made a disastrous miscalculation in UP and very nearly did the same in Gujarat. So I think he cannot afford at this stage to do something that will displease many of his own colleagues in the Congress party.
What new alignments do you think happen now, new chemistries?
I think the most important new thing you're going to see is the coming closer and some coordination between the SP and the BSP in UP. You see, these have a lot in common. Of course, there are lots of differences, but the BJP had managed to drive a wedge between those two parties. And I think that is now not a factor in operation. In that sense, the BJP strategy of dividing the Dalits from the OBCs, I think, is coming a cropper. I won't be surprised if we see more and more coordination between the non-BJP forces now in UP. And let's understand what that means. If the SP and the BSP even have an electoral understanding, they will sweep the next assembly elections. I have no doubt about that. They will sweep, they will win a 2/3 majority, because between them they have a combined vote of 40%, and the distribution of that vote is such that they will win in 2/3 of all seats. So any coordination, leave alone alliance, between the BSP and the SP can radically change political equations in UP. And if you see similar things happen in some other states, I think the BJP's decline will more or less follow automatically. I don't think that the BJP today can hope to get 50 seats in UP, as it did in the last election. It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be an uphill task for the BJP to maintain its pace. One thing that has happened in the last 6 months, as a result partly of Mayawati's measures, the Dalit self-assertion and so on, is that some upper caste groups, for instance the Thakurs and the Jats in parts of UP, feel that the BJP has done nothing for them, and they're moving away from the BJP, and some of them are going to the Samajwadi Party. So the BJP is going to have to fight to preserve the erosion of its own base, and it's going to be fighting a defensive battle. I think many OBC and Dalit groups which were attracted, I mean they were small enough, Dalits never in a big way, some OBC groups like the Lodhs and in some areas Kurmis were attracted to the BJP in the wake of the of the temple agitation until 1992-93. Now some of them will start moving away too. So the BJP is going to be hard put to defend its base in UP. You will see probably a pretty significant erosion of the BJP in the coming years, in spite of having got this sort of hollow sense of power.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mr.